live.
Hey everybody.
Today we are talking about the Mummy, not the Tom. Oh, Emmy disappeared. My bad, my bad. Not the Tom Cruise one, like Star kept saying on Monday, which was
Yeah.
offensive.
Yes. So I want to show off one of my Halloween decorations
Yes.
because it goes
Wait, that's so cool.
eyes like light up and it like says lines from the movie and like moves
What?
its
I love this time of year. It's the only time that I want to decorate because normal
Yeah.
home decor is so like whatever. It's like pillows that say pillow on them or something.
Yeah.
But I love the Halloween stuff and I keep it out all year long.
Yes. But my mom also got me this replica ring
Ooh,
that he wears in the movie.
that he like does this at people and they're like,
Yeah. I'm also drinking some Mummy Moscato
"Ooh,
tonight.
dude, you are so on theme." And she also has a mummy shirt.
Oh yeah, I can stand up and show that too.
Look how sick that is. It had been too long since I'd watched an old movie. So this was the
Yeah.
first one in a while and I'm sad to say I'd forgotten just like how comfy and how much I like the way they look. Like the whole like the old music and like the sounds and the fashion and like the
Yeah.
kind of I don't think they really had like the transatlantic accents as much, but still they have like kind of that way of talking to each other. And I just love it.
Since you were talking about music, I do want to
Yeah.
mention that it's one of the first like talking movies that had like an actual score like for
Oh.
that was made like for that movie. Like the music that they play during the flashback is stuff that they made
Oh.
like for that movie. Obviously the Swan Lake like
Yeah.
theme at the beginning was not.
Right. I did like that though. I was like, "Oh, Swan Lake right away." Like I was loving that. It sets the tone so well.
Oh,
I just like the pacing of old movies, like how there's so much kind of silence, and I guess it was as much a technical limitation as it was like a creative decision, but the moments where they're like sitting and researching or they're like looking over the scrolls or just working and you see the mummy hand just like creeping and it just makes it scarier and more immersive because there's not as much idle conversation. It's just like total silence and then you see his eyes open slowly and you're like, "Oh my God."
the makeup for that scene that Boris Karloff's in
Uh-huh.
took 8 hours to put on
Stop.
before they even like filmed.
And then you have to
Yeah.
go to work after sitting there for 8 hours.
Well, and it's ridiculous too because they didn't even think to put something in so he could go to the bathroom. So it's like, did he have to hold it that whole time?
Probably. And now Star is here asking about Chris Evans, which I had repressed. I had totally blocked that news in my brain.
Yeah, dude.
Ugh,
I
so
cannot.
disappointing. But all of these famous Hollywood men just turn an age and they're like, I think I only like babies.
16 years older than her. Like,
What do they
when he
talk
was,
about?
what do you even talk about? When you were
Yeah.
learning how to drive, she was just being bored.
Yeah, she was like, "Oh, I was in the hospital that day. Oh my God, what happened to you?" Nothing. I was just being born.
Cat shows up all the time on our street.
Learning to drive, being born.
And now I can't see chat because he's in the way, so I'm sorry.
Cat is like, I was editing the Titanic video, which is up now, and we were making fun of Leo, and Cat was just like, "Oh my gosh." But guys, if you haven't watched the 1932 Mummy, you must. Like you
It's
have
only
to.
an hour and 14
Yeah.
minutes,
You
so it's like watching an episode of a TV show.
and it was so good. Like it starts off like Emmy said with the Swan Lake songs and the like the old movie vibes where the credits are first, so you're just watching a bunch of names in a curly font and you're like, "Oh, I can't wait." And I did I mean, I love the original or not the original, like the 90s Mummy. Like I love
Yeah.
it, but I like this one. I don't know better, but in a different way because like the 90s one has those annoying Americans and you like don't feel bad for them because they're just like looting basically.
Yeah.
I felt like I could empathize a little bit more with why they opened the tomb in this movie because they're like, well, we just have to learn. Like, we have to learn about this culture. And it wasn't so much like,
Yeah.
we just want to steal stuff. So we want the riches. And then they like were actually giving it to the Cairo Museum. So I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense. Frank!
He starts bitching about how, oh my god, the Cairo Museum kept everything I found
Yeah,
in this like
I
tomb.
hate it. I was like,
I he they took this mummy. Like, what were you gonna do with that mummy? You like we find out later what
yeah,
he wanted to do with
yeah, so I was like, Frank, you don't live here. You went there. It's like me going to your house and going under your bed and finding a bunch of stuff and being like, I can't believe Star and Emmy want to keep this stuff I found in their house. Like, I found
it.
it. That's when I texted you when Frank was like, I dug up this woman and like, I really felt like I knew her while I was going through her toilet stuff, direct quote. And then, and he's like, and I just like fell in love with her. And I was like, it's a dead woman whose grave you've defiled. Like,
And I have to
right.
also point out that this is when he's trying to flirt with
Yes.
Helen,
Yes.
and he's like telling her about like, "Oh, I went in this tomb. You had to have heard about it. It was like in
Mm-hmm.
all the papers, blah
You've
blah
read
blah."
about it. You know
And then
me.
she's like,
I don't know who the
"How
fuck you
could you
are.
do that? Like,
Yeah.
you like I find that really distasteful." And like you can just tell she's not into it.
Oh my
And
God.
then he immediately follows it up with, "And then I fell in love with this
So
dead
stupid.
fucking corpse."
He's trying to flirt with her. And he did that thing that no one likes where he basically was like, "You're so exotic." He's like, "Are you
Yeah.
Egyptian? You're a little Egyptian, aren't you? Like, you're a little spicy and you're just so different." And she's like, "How'd you know?" And he's like, "You've just, oh my God." And then he tells her that her head reminds her of the dead girl's head.
Frank is really just, and I know he was came around first, but he's
Mm-hmm.
really just like a combination of Star-Lord
Yes.
and fucking Lisa from Nightmare on Elm Street
You
2.
are so right. All of the arrogance and entitlement of Star-Lord with the obsessive, disproportionate admiration of Lisa. I love sunken, sleepy looking eyes, so I'm just like finding myself weirdly attracted to the mummy right now.
Dude, I
But,
I fucking get it. Like I love Imhotep.
I mean, he's cool.
Like
He's so much better than Frank.
I love Boris Karloff, both as an actor, and
Uh-huh.
I never got to meet him as a person. Obviously, he died before I was born. But everything, because I watched like a documentary about him. Like I've watched the special features on all my old Universal like movies. Like
Uh-huh.
he just seems like such a cool
He
dude.
does.
One of the special features on this that I rewatched for today, they
Uh-huh.
were talking about how Zeta Johann, who played Helen,
Yes.
she said the only person basically that was nice to her in Hollywood was Boris Karloff.
Why were
So,
they mean to her? 'Cause she's a woman?
probably, and she was like, she started out as a Broadway actress
Oh, those
and
snobbies.
moved to Hollywood to make more money.
Uh-huh.
This was the director's first movie.
Oh.
And so he wanted like he wanted somebody to pick on that could be his scapegoat. And he
Oh.
was like, I can't do Boris Karloff because he's a bigger star.
Right.
And like Universal, like The Mummy was basically written for Boris Karloff. So
Oh.
he's like, well, I can't do him. It's
Right.
like, but I'll do her because she's not famous. She's like just starting out
I
in
see.
movies.
Oh, that's I felt like I was actually thinking while watching it that she was a great person for the role. Like I felt she kind
Yeah.
of looked the part and she had such an interesting voice and face, but it's interesting knowing that he picked her more just so he could pick on her.
Like I know, you know the scene at the end where like
Uh-huh.
she's already showing a lot of skin.
Oh yeah, I wondered about
He
that.
he was like, you have to do this scene topless.
In
And
the 30s?
yeah, it will because he knew that she would not do it.
Of course not.
And then he could go and be like, she's just such a temperamental actress. Like,
Wow,
you guys
okay.
don't know what I'm dealing with. But her
Is
being
this
smart, like fucking Helen,
uh-huh.
was like, she knew what he was doing. So she was like, okay, I'll do that if the studio says it's okay.
Oh, go off. I love it.
So, like, kudos to her.
She kind of outsmarted in there. I remember, well, of course, I remember it was just this morning when I was watching the movie and I saw her outfit and I was like, this is a little scandalous for the
Yeah, I
30s. Like her whole back was out and like most of her front, in
yeah,
fact.
like basically just her nipples are covered.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
It was like pre Hays Code, which
Right.
was like really when all that shit started with like, oh, couples can't sleep in the same bed, blah 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 blah.
Was that
So
the same thing like that maybe Alfred Hitchcock was dealing with where it was like they could only kiss for like less than so many seconds.
yeah,
So he would have them like kiss and then break away and then kiss more and then break away again. Like I think
yeah,
that maybe was the code he was circumventing. That's so
yeah, because I
interesting.
think it went into effect like 2 years after this movie came out.
Oh, interesting. Oh my God, can you
Yeah,
imagine what they would think if they could see movies today? They would probably actually just die.
yeah. Oh
Um,
my god.
Imagine showing them even just like an old movie like Friday the 13th that they would when I saw that outfit and then Frank was heading there to go save her, which he didn't even do because he's useless. Um, I thought maybe he might faint when he saw her in that outfit. He just saw her like like fainted in the museum and he was like, I'm
Yeah,
in love.
dude, speaking of which,
He's so disgusting.
so she passes out
Mhm.
and
And he just takes her.
and he just like fucking picks her up, brings her to his car,
Yep.
brings her to his house instead of to see a fucking doctor. And then she wakes up, she's like, where the hell am I? I don't know you people.
You fainted and a man just takes you home
Yeah.
and you wake up and he's just like, "Hey, you're really
You want to hear
hot."
about how I loved this dead body I dug up?
And not only that, but he's like, "Why, you've heard of me, haven't you? I was in the
Yeah.
paper." And you're like, "I still don't know where I am."
I also really like in that scene because he's telling her before he starts talking about digging in the tomb and all that crap.
For a girlfriend.
He's like, she's like, where am I? And he's like, oh, well, you passed out in front of the museum and I like took you home. And she's like, what the hell was I doing at the museum? And he's
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know. And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, well, I wish I did.
I know.
And then he's like, oh, well, then I was doing, and then she's like, let's not talk about it. And I'm like, fucking smart call. Like, nobody wants to hear about your life,
Dude, I
right?
loved that part. He's like, "Well, about me." And she's like, "No." No, I was texting Emmy like, "Emmy, this guy's annoying." And she was like, "Oh, I know." And then it seemed like Helen thought he was annoying too. And then next thing I know, they're making out. And I'm like, I guess that's just
Yeah,
the
dude.
romance arc in old movies. That's their one flaw. It's like, I hate
I
you.
mean,
And then they're in love.
it kind of is sometimes,
Yeah,
but I think in Helen's case, it's just he kept fucking like harassing her and shoving himself on her, and then she's
true.
just like, okay, fine, whatever. He's like, oh, you're so beautiful, blah blah blah
I'm
blah
gonna
blah, and
make
she's
you
like,
love me.
please knock it off, and he just
Hmm.
keeps going. And she's like, no, really. And then he says something, and she laughs. He's like, you can't laugh at me, and
Oh,
then
that
like,
part. I forgot about that part was so triggering. I was like, is he gonna kill her? He's like, you can call me a devil, I think, but you can't laugh at me. And I was like, oh, here we
yep.
go. Here come the insecurities.
I think our first sign that Frank should like the first thing that should warn us that Frank's a horrible person
Mhm.
is Professor Pearson. When
Uh-huh.
we see like when they first introduce Imhotep as Ardith Bay, like
Oh yeah.
he's in like those two scenes, and it's like as soon as they find the tomb, it's like he disappears from the movie and you
Yeah.
never see him. He's like, I don't want anything to do with Frank ever again in my life.
Right. I know. He's like
Having to work with him was horrible. When we found the tomb, he was like fucking obsessing over this corpse
it's
and like
gross.
fangirling over
Right.
it. Like, I don't want to talk to him, but like, whatever.
He's like, there's a lot of problems there. I'm not interested in continuing that experience.
Yeah.
He's so
And
stupid.
also, because after they find the tomb and it goes, like, the mummy and all the stuff goes to the Cairo Museum,
Uh-huh.
Imhotep goes there, and then Frank's dad goes and starts talking to him, and he's like, "Oh, come back to my office." And he's like, "Okay, whatever." And they're
Uh-huh.
talking, and then Frank shows up, and he's like, "Okay, I'm getting the fuck." I was like, I never want to be around
I'm
this fucking loose.
I'm ready to go. My mom says I have to come home right now. I liked at the beginning when that guy like laughed himself to death. That was some
Yeah.
creepy laughter that was happening. That was really good.
Especially since this was pretty early into the talking, like,
Right.
movie era. So if you watch like those old movies from that time, a lot of the time, especially like the smaller roles like that,
Yeah.
the people are like really overacting and hamming it up.
Mhm.
But like he was just so good at that.
He was
Like
awesome at it.
I see this like mummy and I go crazy like fucking out.
I know, it's like this would probably be me, just like, oh, okay, that's what's that's life now, I guess. He just went on a
Yeah.
walk.
Those guys were like right outside the door. How'd they not fucking see him?
That's what I was wondering. And he had it like trailing behind him and everything. I'm like, this is pretty conspicuous. If it were me, if I were Helen, I would just go back to being whatever her name is, I've forgotten. And marry
Phenomenon.
Imhotep. Yeah.
Yeah, dude,
He's
same.
way
We
cooler.
are the same person. Like, you made the wrong fucking
She
choice.
did. Like I can understand a bit in the 90s one cuz like Brendan Fraser is really good looking. But Frank is
It's
not good
problematic.
looking and he's
Yeah.
problematic. So he's got nothing going for him. They've also just met and Imhotep's
Yes.
cool. Like
Yeah.
she's like, "Oh my God, are you gonna put me in that thing, that liquid?" And he's like, "I was buried alive for you, okay?" Like,
Phenomenon. My love has lasted longer than the temples of our gods. No man ever suffered as I did for you.
I'm
buried
only
alive.
asking you for like a fraction of that.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's like you'll just have like a moment of slight discomfort and then everything will be Gucci. Like, you can't just do that. Like, I would have done it. He was buried alive and then he came back through the power of love. That's so romantic. And she's
Yes.
like, "No, I'm still
Agreed.
young. Like, who cares? You could be
Well,
like,
you get to be young forever
I
now.
know. I know. I was like, "Well, you either grow old with Frank
Yeah.
or you stay young forever with Imhotep." I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the contest.
Also, I have to say, okay, you can stay human and you have to be with Frank, which I imagine right after the credits, she has like instant regret, like,
Mhm.
oh fuck, I'm
I
stuck with this
fucked up.
loser
Yeah.
forever. It's like, or you could be with Imhotep
Mhm.
and you can fucking get turned into a living mummy.
Mhm.
You never have to grow old. You have the
Mhm.
fucking power to control people to do whatever they want. And if you piss
Exactly.
them off, you can just kill them and nobody will fucking know.
It's like the perfect life.
Exactly.
I did kind of like that she kind of saved herself, like between her
Yes.
and Isis. It was all about
Yes.
um
I was gonna bring that up
we
actually.
are the same.
Because I always bring that up to Star. I'm like, this is one of the first films where like a chick saves herself instead of having to be saved by a man.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, she didn't save herself. Isis did. I'm like, but she called Isis and like,
Mhm.
please help me. She's like, Frank's fucking useless. Like, Frank's getting his ass kicked, right?
Frank is so stupid. Frank's like, "Oh my god." Yeah, it was her idea to even do that in the first place. Like, she took a chance. She
Yeah.
was like, I know I broke my vows, so this might not work, but please help me. And Isis is like, girl, I got you. So it was like two women, if anything, which I really
Yes.
liked because I was like, oh, I cannot. Like, when Frank and I think it was his dad maybe were rushing to try to get to her. And I'm like, I'm really liking this movie, but I guess I'm gonna have to just grit my teeth and deal with Frank rescuing her because this is the 30s and that's what men in the 30s get to do. And then he didn't. He just kind of got there and was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
ah!" And then they're like, "Oh, try and talk to her. Like her love for you will bring her back." And it's like she's literally just like unconscious. It's not her love. And he's like shaking her. He's like, "Helen," and she's like, "Okay, I'm up." Like, I don't think that was love. I think it was being shaken
Yeah.
and yelled at. When she's realized she's kind of like fighting Imhotep and she's like, I'm young, I don't want to die. She doesn't ever mention Frank. She's never like, I have
Yeah.
someone else who I care about. And even when she's saying to him, like, I loved you once, but that was a
Yeah.
long time ago and you died, she doesn't say, I've met someone else. I have a new
Yep.
love now. She doesn't say any of that. I think she's literally just like, I still think you're so hot, but like, you're dead.
It's so stupid. It's almost funny.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, don't even try to convince me that Ardith Bay is a mummy because that's just so stupid. And then because everybody can just read Frank and how fucking stupid he is,
Uh-huh.
you would think that the doctor would like go into this whole fucking spiel like Dr. Loomis to like the
Yeah.
sheriff and Halloween like to convince him. But no, all the fucking doctor has to say to instantly get Frank to agree with him is, "Oh, Helen thinks you're hot."
I
Like
know.
she she didn't tell me, but I could just tell by looking at her. And then Frank's like, "Okay, are we using your car, Mike?"
That's
I
ex
instantly believe, even though you didn't say anything about Artist Bay, you just told me Helen thinks I'm good. Like,
I was about to say the exact same thing. It's like your dad is dead. And he's like shitting on his dad. He's like, my dad believed in stupid shit. Like he died of natural causes, just like that other guy just died of natural causes for no reason at all. And no one can tell me otherwise because I'm the smartest one here. And then the guy's like, I think Helen's into you. And he's like, oh my God, really? Do you think she likes me? And like, he doesn't even care about his dad. And then he's like, oh, but this is like the worst time. Like, he's like annoyed. Like, I can't even do anything because my dad just died. Like, so irritating.
so then Helen goes to see Imhotep because she doesn't want to see Frank,
Of course.
obviously.
Yeah.
And then, hi, cat. And then he shows her the flashback,
Mm-hmm.
which I think this was a good call because apparently they had shot a whole bunch of extra footage that was he was also gonna show her about like her and her other past lives.
Uh-huh. Oh, interesting.
And I think like it would have been interesting to see,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it was probably a wise call to like cut it out because it's like it doesn't really have anything to do with the story. Like, and apparently all this, like all her past lives, she also died really young, like
Aw.
Ankhsenamen. So it's like, well, then you're kind of making it seem like, well, then Helen's gonna die young, which
Yeah.
To be fair, she probably did like later this day because she's like, I don't want to be stuck with her. I know there was like
Yeah.
one where it was like she was kind of like
Oh, Joan of Arc?
yes, Joan
Okay,
of Arc.
sweet.
It was kind of like that kind of thing, and then they like feed her to lions.
Oh.
And, like that would have been like cool to see, especially since apparently that was a really fucking rough scene for her to film.
Oh man, they
Because I guess
actually
like
uh
all the fucking crew
uh-huh.
got to be like fucking cages, like the director and everybody, and then it's just like you get to chill out with these fucking lions. Good luck.
Stop. Oh my god, that's mean.
So like it sucks that it got cut because, you know,
She works so hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the same time I'm like it kind of takes away from the story.
Anyway, yeah, fucking Frank. Like, he's so like, oh, I would have found it on my own. Like, no, you wouldn't. You
You guys
wouldn't.
packing up to leave.
I know. And I like how they
Yeah.
weren't like suspicious of that at all. Just like some random guy who's like really tall is like, hey, I know where you can find some stuff. Just dig it up. Like, I can't dig it up because I'm not supposed to, but you can dig it up. And they're like, okay. I can't imagine
I,
working with Frank.
dude, me neither. And he fucking wore like a tux to work at the
Right.
museum. Like,
Right.
what the hell?
No, worst guy. It would make me feel good to think that when they made this movie, they intended us to all hate Frank.
I think instead of the I'm attracted to dead people, I
Uh-huh.
think the nowadays like red flag is the people that are attracted to serial killers.
Yes.
Like the I think Jeffrey Dahmer is just really
Oh.
hot and just misunderstood, and
Oh.
I could have changed him. Like,
That's
bitch,
him.
no, no, you can't.
That's Frank. Frank would have been like, I could have changed Jeffrey Dahmer. He's just a
Yeah,
shithead. Like, he's just a fucked up
yeah, and
person.
he's not good looking.
No, I'll draw him right now. It's not even
Like,
hard.
I don't get it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people, what is if you are in love with a serial killer, please go to therapy and get help. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah,
Stupid looking.
100%.
That's him.
So,
Yeah.
try to remember what we were talking about before we got distracted by
I
that.
actually don't remember.
Helen goes to see Imhotep and he's showing her the flashback. And then afterwards, he's like talking to her and he's like, and she's like kind of in a trance because she's been watching this. And then he's like, Anxanamen, my love for you's lasted longer than the Temple of Arc. No man suffered as I suffered for you, which fucking
Right.
true. Frank, if he were there, he'd be disagreeing.
Yep. He'd be I stubbed my toe this morning.
That's probably one of my favorite lines,
No, it's so
at least
good.
of his. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's because we've talked about how, like, nowadays romance stuff, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not that great. But I'm like, that's like a fucking romance line I can really fucking get behind.
Actually walked the walk, like he did fully die for her, and not just in like
Yep.
a casual way, like buried alive. And Frank is just like, I'm gonna make you love me.
Looking at my notes, I
Yeah.
also want to bring up to go back to Zeta.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, she passed out on set one day
Oh shit.
from like the director like making her work harder. And the
Oh.
only fucking person that checked on her,
Was
like when
Boris?
she said when she woke up, Boris was standing over her and he's like, "Oh my god, are you
Oh my god. I
okay?"
I did feel like her and Boris had a lot of chemistry. Like,
Yeah,
even if it wasn't necessarily romantic, I just felt like they had vibes. Like, they
yeah,
seemed so comfortable with each other, and it added a lot more to the movie. Like, when she's meeting him, and she's just kind of like, oh. And they're like, you have to
yeah.
go home. And she's like, I don't want to. I'm not a child. You
Go
can't just tell me to
leave
go
with
home.
Frank right now. Like, fuck that.
But yeah, I know I said it already, but again, I just loved that she figured out a way out for herself
Yeah.
and that Frank didn't save her. And I just also was really laughing at Frank and the doctor bursting in and then Imhotep right away is like, here's my ring, and they're just like, ooh.
Also, right before that, like when they first show up at the museum,
Uh-huh.
Frank's like, "Oh my god, what's that?" And he like points, and then they show, and it's just fucking smoke coming out of the fucking fireplace. What the fuck do you mean, what's that? Have you never fucking seen smoke before?
He's so stupid.
Yeah, dude, and another fucking thing he's so stupid about,
Uh-huh.
that doctor gives him that pendant, the like ISIS pendant. He's like,
Oh
wear
God.
this, it'll
Yep.
protect you. He's like, oh, well, then I should give it to Helen to protect her. And he's like, no, like, he doesn't want to hurt Helen. Like, he's in love with
Yeah.
Helen.
Helen
Like,
doesn't
she's
need
fine.
it. Helen will
Like,
be just fine.
he's not gonna hurt Helen. He has no fucking qualms about, like, killing your dumb ass. I don't even know if the doctor is really that smart,
Yeah.
because when Helen, because we have to point out Helen is the one who's like, I'm gonna get dressed up sexy,
Yeah.
and he's gonna be like, oh my god, like, come over to my place right now.
Yeah.
You look fucking
You
hot.
look good.
And then when the doctor walks in, he's like, oh yeah, that's totally like what I was thinking. I'm glad you like thought
Yeah,
of
no
it.
way.
I'm glad you thought of it now too. And it's like, if you'd thought of it, you would have been fucking in here. Like,
He would have
I need
told her
you to like
already.
take your clothes off, like right now. And I like how she fucking tricks the lady, like, I want to look sexy for
For
Frank,
Frank.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the doctor comes in, it's like, oh, you know more than I thought you did.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh yeah,
like,
he
bitch,
does
like,
say that.
you didn't think of shit.
Imhotep is like, we had something together and I died for you, and we can still have that if you just go through like a little bit of pain. And she actually is interested. She's like, you're right, we did have something, I remember. Frank is just
Yeah.
like, you look like a dead girl I saw, and I'm never going to leave you alone until you finally agree to go out with me. Like,
It's it's like I said earlier, he's like Star-Lord, like what we were saying
mhm.
with Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Like, if you just tried,
Yeah.
we could go out again. Like,
Why won't you just
no.
try? I felt like this movie did a way better job making me think about how shitty that actually was. Because even though
Yeah.
the 90s one, like, puts you into that scene and you actually see, like, how they died and stuff and why,
Yeah.
this one, I thought it was cool that the archaeologists that find him are, like, examining him and they're like, oh shit, like, this guy didn't have his entrails removed or whatever, the viscera. And then they're like, this was a really painful death. Like, what did this guy do? Like, they really
Yeah.
wanted him to suffer, and like they're appreciating like how much. And you don't get that in the 90s one. No one is talking about, wow, this guy really went through it. Everyone's just like, oh my god, so mean that he's not letting us be grave robbers.
He probably suffered before even that, because she was like the daughter of the pharaoh, and like,
Yeah.
oh, you have to be like a virgin of Isis, which she does say, like, at the end we mentioned, or she's like, I
Mhm.
broke my vows. And it's like these two were in love, and they're like, you know, dating in
Yeah.
secret.
Yeah.
Although not so much secret, because when she's dying,
Yeah.
he's like, fuck it. I'm just gonna be like by your bedside. I'm gonna be like kissing your hand, and those two
Yeah.
dudes are gonna be like judging us in the background and like shaking their heads like
Yeah.
disapprovingly.
Tell me your thoughts.
um, my thoughts are, this is one of my favorite movies. I love it. Love Boris Karloff. I love Zeta. I think the story's great. I think everybody should watch it. Like, it's only an hour and 14 minutes,
Yeah, it's
so
easy. Yeah, I second all of your thoughts. Like, the moment I put it on, I know I said this already, but within like the first couple minutes, I was like, I love this movie. I like the slow pacing. I like the
yeah.
quiet moments, and I hate Frank, but it's like a
Yep.
fun, it's like when it's fun to hate a character. So it's not like
Yeah.
super frustrating. It's just like, God damn, that guy is stupid. And it's fun to watch Helen put him in his place a lot. So
Yeah.
I really like it. And I still love the 90s one too, but they're different enough
Yeah.
that they're totally, you don't feel like, oh, I'm basically just watching shot for shot of the movie, but older. Like,
Yeah.
definitely watch it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.